Welcome to Unit 2. With this video, we're beginning a new unit, language. With each new unit, the first order of business is always to take the pre-study diagnostic quiz to establish a baseline of your current knowledge. Remember, you get a 100 just for taking the pre-study quiz, but try your best nonetheless. Our goal is to see growth between the pre- and post-study quizzes. If you haven't taken the pre-study language quiz yet, please pause the video, take the quiz, and come on back so we can talk about word choice. All quizzes are available in Canvas. Our topic for Lesson 1 is appropriate words, which are those that suggest the level of formality or informality that you want your writing to convey. There are 5 registers or styles of language. The first register is called static because it almost never changes. It's frozen. Think about the Pledge of Allegiance, the Lord's Prayer, the Constitution and its preamble. These are things we memorize because they're culturally significant, and there are some social situations that require us to repeat them on demand. No one actually has a conversation in static register. The second register is formal speech. It is regulated one-way communication. A speaker is delivering a message, a sermon, announcements, or even a judicial opinion. Think about Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. It's such a classic you could almost include it in the static register. It has a very formal oratory tone, and Dr. King masterfully used rhetorical devices to accomplish a specific goal. The third register is consultative speech. This is the language of professionals, job interviews, doctors and patients, attorneys and clients, or judges and attorneys. Besides being the language of business, it is two-way communication, whereas formal register is one-way. Casual register is where we live. This is the informal language of peers and friends. This is group language. You have to be a member to engage in the language spoken by the group. Think about the abbreviations used when texting or DMing: IRL, AFK, and SUS. Ever tried to have a conversation with a 15-year-old? Hello, Urban Dictionary. Casual register is extremely fluid and is constantly evolving, as opposed to static, which is a fixed register. Finally, we have the intimate register that is spoken between best friends, spouses, and siblings. You know, like when your mom gives you the look and you know what she's going to say before the words come out of her mouth. This is the language spoken by people who have relationships of long standing. You may have noticed that academic language is not one of the registers, perhaps because it doesn't really fit into one. Academic writing should be done in formal register, and theoretically, classroom discussion should be consultative. As you progress through your collegiate career, you'll probably experience consultative exchanges on a regular basis. However, for our class, we speak casually, but write formally. Generally speaking, you can switch from one register to an adjacent one without any issues. You may have noticed that I switch pretty frequently between consultative and casual. However, it's considered rude to skip a register. My first 11 years of teaching, I was at Forest Oak Middle School. In case you're unfamiliar, that's the hood/barrio. We had a very uptight AP, and one day she said something to one of my kids. She was using formal register, and the kid, not knowing any better, responded in casual. The AP, of course, now had the excuse she was looking for to yell at the kid for being disrespectful, which was not the kid's intent. The AP set her up. Now, the converse is also true. It took me forever to learn to pronounce gangsta without the hard R at the end. And the kids loved to harass me about it. However, I'm now fluent in the casual register spoken at Forest Oak. So how do you know which register is appropriate? The correct register depends on the audience and your purpose. Take a look at these two examples. 87 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. These well-known words were written by Abraham Lincoln for his speech at the dedication of the Gettysburg Civil War Cemetery in 1863. Lincoln was speaking to a crowd of 20,000, including many officials and prominent citizens. It makes sense that the language he chose for the solemn occasion was very formal with an oratory tone. Our second example, Our Family, Like Most, Had Its Ups and Downs, was written by Judy Davis in Ours Was a Dad. It was part of a less formal eulogy delivered to a small gathering of family and friends at a funeral in 2004. While their purposes were similar, to memorialize a solemn occasion, their audiences were vastly different, and therefore their tones were different. Colloquial language is the language of casual conversation, but slang, like "sup brah," is not appropriate for formal speech or for academic and professional writing. Moving your writing from casual to formal is all about word choice, as shown here. A lot of high school kids have so little time for lunch that they end up gobbling down their food as they race to class, versus many high school students have so little time for lunch that they must eat as they race to class. They say the same thing, but the second one has a more formal tone because of the words the writer chose. Some writers go overboard the other way, using long or complicated words to lend authority to their work, but it often just makes them sound pretentious and stuffy. For example, subsequent to adopting the new system, managers averred that their staff worked synergistically in a way that exceeded parameters. It's too much. This works so much better. After adopting the new system, managers claimed that their staff worked together better than expected. It's still formal, but without being ridiculous. Use this level of stiff and formal language sparingly and only when it best captures your meaning and suits your writing context. This is especially true if you aren't sure about the meaning of a word. It's much better to double-check the definition than to use one of these complicated words incorrectly. Jargon is a specialized vocabulary of a profession, a trade, or a field, and should be used only when you know your audience will understand what you're saying. A video enthusiast might easily understand this paragraph, but most readers would not be familiar with terms like HDMI, DVI, and 1080p. HDMI is the easiest and most convenient way to go about high def. Why? Because you get video and sound in a single USB-like cable instead of a nest of component cables or the soundless garden hose of DVI. Also, unless you're trying to run 1080p over 100 feet or some such, stay away from premium brands. Any on-spec cheapy HDMI cable will be perfect for standard living room setups. When you're writing for an audience of non-specialists, resist the temptation to use overly technical language. Rather than "the mini sternotomy at the lower end of the sternum resulted in satisfactory cosmesis," say "the small incision at the lower end of the breastbone preserved her appearance." The second version still carries authority without beating the audience over the head with it. Steer clear of cliches, which are expressions so familiar that they've become trite, such as "why does snow?" or "the grass is always greener." Cliches are fine when you're talking to your buddies, but academic writing requires less trite language. Instead of "the company needs a recruiter who thinks outside the box," use "unconventionally." Instead of "after canoeing all day, we all slept like logs," use "soundly." And Fernita is a team player, say she collaborates well. Appropriate words are those that convey the desired level of formality, are not pretentious, too specialized, or cliché. Look at you already done with Lesson 1, Appropriate Words. Don't forget to check Canvas for a quiz, and in Lesson 2, we'll talk about precise language. Thanks for stopping by. And thanks to Slides Carnival and Unsplash for their help with my slides template. See you next time.